Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Talking Tradesman. Today, remotely, I have with me Heather from She Paints Berkshire. So first of all, Heather, thank you very much for joining me today to be on this episode of the Talking Tradesman, and let's talk.
Well, thank you for having me. Sorry, I'm remote, but I'm just not able to drive that far at the
I
moment.
was going to say, yeah, I mean, we'll get onto the reasons as to why it is remote, but it's absolutely fine. Fully appreciate your time. Remote recordings are always an option, so it's no problem at all. There's no need to apologise on that one. To be honest with you, it probably sets a good sort of entry point as to why the episode is remote.
Yeah.
So Heather reached out to me initially to ask if I wanted to take part in a raffle that she's sorting out for charity, which I'm going to let Heather explain about. And of course, I said yes. I'm going to be donating one of the Talking Tradesman range of hoodies. But Heather, I guess at this point, it's best to sort of hand over to you. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, where you're from, and then we can get into the raffle and everything else.
Okay. Well, as Russ said, I am Heather and I run She Paints Berkshire. And I am a painter decorator, and I've been running my own business for a year now. And before that, I was a biology teacher and I worked in state schools for 13 years, in and around where I live now. I live in Twyford. Um, and I gave it up because I just didn't want to work in schools anymore. I felt like I had given enough of my soul to that.
Mm.
And I'd always had a real passion for decorating. My dad taught me how to decorate when I was 14. Mostly so he didn't have to do it because he really hates decorating.
Yeah.
And also so he didn't have to pay a decorator. And I just really loved it. I found it really, really satisfying. And then a couple of years ago, we did two massive extensions to our house. And there was something about the builders. I just was like, no, you don't need to paint my house. You're a bit wrong-uns.
Oh,
Um,
you can't let the builders paint. Yeah, absolutely.
and so I did it. And at the time, I was working 2 days a week teaching. Probably important to say I have two little kids. I've got a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old. And so at the time, they were like 3 and 5. And I started with painting the extensions, and the builders were like, "You're quite good at this. You know what you're doing." Um, and I'd done some painting in university. Anytime my parents painted, it was me who did it. I painted my sister's house when she bought her first house. Um, and so I painted basically my whole house, and the builders were like, you can do this. And then one day I found this advert on Facebook, such a random thing, that said, wanted trainee female decorator. So I went and worked for an all female run firm locally.
Okay.
Um, and it was great. I really enjoyed working with other women. And actually, one of the girls I work with has since gone off on her own, and she's now on Instagram.
Mm.
Um, and it was really fun. But at the end of the day, I worked for someone else,
Yeah.
and that wasn't me. I was very much like I wanted to be in charge. I wanted to run it the way I wanted to run it, and also I just wanted to work by myself. I'd worked with people for 13 years. I really didn't. I just needed that peace. So it was, especially because I've got little kids. Um,
Mm.
so I decided to go out on my own. And over the last year, and it's a year, 4 days ago,
Oh,
that
wow.
I started the business, and it's just like it was a bit slow at first, and it was all word of mouth. All of my business has always been word of mouth,
Mm.
um, and then after Christmas, it just blew up. It just went wild, to the point where you know I'll talk about this in like a few minutes, but in the last weeks, I've had to just say I'm really sorry. I've had to shut my diary. And
Mm.
I'm probably fielding like 10 calls a week by,
Wow.
I'm not advertising at all. I'm just like, it's just sat on the
Yeah.
back burner right now. Um, but I just really love it and I enjoy it and I like getting to that end product. And, it's really important to me that people have, you know, sound tradespeople that don't leave them in the lurch. I mean, we bought this house and it was a wreck 8 years ago, literally falling apart. And I've spent the last 8 years doing it up. So, a good tradesperson from a bad tradesperson. And I was determined to not be a bad tradesperson. Um, so yeah. And then, so
That's really good. Then I mean, to be honest, there's a few things that have like twigged my ear there. First of all, we'll have to have another conversation relating to the education system because,
yeah, I mean,
as I'm
that's
sure
like a
we've
whole
discussed
other
this
can of
before.
worms.
Yeah, we've discussed this before, but I've got some quite strong opinions when it comes to the education system.
Oh, I do too,
We're
and
not
that's
going to do that
probably
today.
that's
Yes,
probably why I'm not in it anymore.
we
But
we won't do that today. We won't do that
yeah,
today. But secondly, one of the things that interested me that you said there was that you actually sought out working on your own for the isolation.
yeah. I
Like
mean,
being on your own, working on your own.
yeah. I mean, if you so for 13 years, I taught 5 lessons a day.
Mm,
Most of that time, 5 days a week. So that's 150 kids a day. Plus, then I would come home to my own family for the last
yeah.
almost 8 years now. Um, and it's quite mentally taxing. And it's not just the kids that are exhausting, it's their parents.
Mm,
Um, and the first school I taught at for 8 years. And it was a state school and requires improvement. So it was under real Ofsted pressure. Behavior was really bad. There's really high percentages of pupil premium students. It was a rough area.
mm,
It was, pretty council. Um, the kids were brilliant. I really, really loved them. But you're like literally, for those 5 hours you're teaching a day, putting on a show. It is a performance, and you're like trying to get these kids who have absolutely zero interest in science um, to have some interest so that they can
mm.
get like a C grade, or now it's the equivalent 4 or 5 grade.
Yeah, I
Um,
don't understand the new grading system. I don't know why change it. Like it worked, everyone
because
understood it. Why
yeah,
change it?
it was a stupid change. But to be honest, there were so many stupid changes over the years, and it's just become like at the start of my career, I loved it, and there are kids
Mm,
I still talk to from my first sort of 5 6 years of teaching. But year on year, it just became worse and
yeah,
worse, and it was just most of my colleagues, their mental health was just in the bin. Uh, they don't want to be doing the job anymore because it's just
mm,
so pressure driven. There's no money. There's years I've taught where the school couldn't afford to give the kids exercise books. Um, or your laptop would break in September and you wouldn't get a new one until February. So you'd be like writing on the board. But at the same
mm,
time, there's all this like pressure to perform for Ofsted. And you're like, but how do I do that if the kids I'm teaching don't have exercise books or pens and pencils?
yeah.
And I don't have a laptop. So, anyways, 13 years in, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And that was it. So
Well, credit for making the change. I mean, it's a big
it's a
step,
big
and
change.
yeah, it is. And just to clarify, when I said that I've got a big issue with the education system, I think teaching as a profession is really noble, and I think 99% of teachers go into it for all the right reasons. They want to teach kids, they want to help
Yeah.
people, and it's got a very noble sort of like ethical background to it. But my
Yeah.
issue comes with the system. It's
Oh,
the
absolutely. And
curriculum, the way that
mine
it's
is the
done,
same.
yeah, the
But
institution, as it were. It's not with the teachers. So just to clarify that,
oh
before the
no.
teachers come for me, I haven't got
No,
enough. I love teachers.
the teachers won't come for you. The teachers all feel the same way. And
Mm,
they're just so tired of being told what to do. And like there's almost 0% autonomy in teaching. You are
yeah,
literally told what to teach, when to teach it, how to teach it. And it's just not fun. Um, and also because you're so bound by how much progress the kids have to make.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
you're There's so much pressure, and teachers work some of the most insane hours. ever.
Mm.
I mean, today I met with my neighbor who's a teacher. She's a maths teacher at the same school I left last year. Um, and she messaged me this morning. She said, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I fell asleep last night reading CPOMs, which is like the safeguarding um, program that they use in schools." She was like, "I was just catching up on one of my students." And I was like, "What time was that?" And she was like, "Oh, it was like 11 o'clock at night." And I was just like, this isn't a life. Like, you're on
Yeah,
so little money for that level of stress. Um,
exactly that. Yeah.
so yeah, I don't no, I had no problem with being a teacher. I had a real problem with state education in this country
Mm.
and the people who decide all the stuff about state education. So um, I stuck it out. I gave it, I left once when my kids were born, and I made the decision to go back to make sure that they got into this local school. But the second time it was like, no, this is it. I gave it a second shot, and that second shot really wasn't for me.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, and then
I'm
at,
glad to hear
at
you
one
got out.
at one point last year, sort of April to the end of the school year, I was doing both jobs. So it was a bit of a bizarre setup. So Monday and Tuesday, I would go and teach biology. I'd be doing my dissections and teaching multiple children a day. And then Thursday, Friday, I'd go work for this other company, and I just loved it. I absolutely dreaded Monday, Tuesday, and then Thursday,
Mm.
Friday, I absolutely loved. Um, you know, chucking on my dungarees and going and painting in someone's house, and it was such a laugh. It was a real laugh. Um, but like I said, I it wasn't necessarily the way I wanted to run a business. And because I've got little kids, my whole business runs around them. So
Mm.
I only work the hours 9 to 3, which most decorators are like, "What? Sorry." those,
Yeah.
those are stupid hours. Um, and so I really only work sort of like a 2 or 3 mile radius from my house, which
Brilliant.
I think to some decorators, they would think that's absolutely mad and really limits my customer base. Um, but I don't have to travel any further.
Heather, if you've got enough work in that demographic and you're working to the parameters that you want to work to, I think you're winning.
To be honest, I could
Yeah,
probably, on my street, keep myself busy for the next sort of 3 months, because
there we
every
go.
day I see somebody on the street and they're like, "Ooh, I need to ask you about something." And it's
Yeah.
always, "Can you come round and do a quote?" Um, and, it's great. It's really, really nice. Um, but yeah, so the reason I left was I wanted to be able to be flexible around my kids. And that's not just the school day. I drop them off, I pick them up, I take
Mm.
them to all their clubs. Um, I I wanted to be able to choose to be there for their school holidays if I wanted to. I, you know, I didn't want to have to stuff them in clubs anymore. I didn't, I've always had those school holidays. I could maintain them this way. Um, and actually, what I earn decorating is on par, if not more, than I was earning teaching.
Yeah.
And I have way more job satisfaction. My mental health is about a million times better. Um, yeah, it's just
To me, that
it.
that is a huge net positive. Everything
Yeah,
that you've said
exactly.
there, the hours are better, the mental health is better, the money's on par or better. What isn't to love about that setup?
Yeah, and I used to get home from teaching. I know people think, "Oh, you only teach from 9 till 3," um, but I used to stay at work until at least 5:30. I would have stayed longer
Mm.
if I could have, but I had to pick my kids up from whatever wraparound care they were at. Um, and then, everyone would have dinner, kids would go to bed, and I would be on the sofa. And at about 8 o'clock, I couldn't even keep my eyes open anymore. I was just absolutely dead to the world. I had nothing left to give. My husband would ask me questions, and I'd be like, "Oh, I can't even talk to you right now. I've just got no steam left." Um,
Mm.
and as soon as I started decorating, my husband was like, "You're so chirpy in the evenings. Like, you're happy. You come home from work happy, not like
Yeah.
completely drained." Um, and yeah, now I'll stay up until like 11 or 12 at night, and I don't feel like at that point I'm not like dozing off on the sofa either. I'm like, oh, I've watched a show and I actually know what's happening in the show.
Yeah.
Or like I'll read a book and not doze off like a page into it. Um, so yeah, it's definitely just a different
You know
life.
what? It's actually really refreshing to have heard that, because quite
I think,
often the conversations that I'm having in this environment are a little bit weighted towards the issues of being in the building trades, and obviously the mental health crisis that exists within it and the reasons why. So it's actually
yeah,
really nice to sit here and listen to it being the upside, the step up was to move into the trades, and that it's essentially a happy success story. So it's nice to have heard that. Let's take a moment there to say a massive thank you to our headline sponsors, Zinza, and have a quick chat about their new product, Bin Aqua. Now, Zinza Bin needs no introduction, but have you heard of the Bin Aqua? It's their most innovative launch yet, and it does everything that Bin does, but it's water-based. It's a water-based 4-in-1 primer, sealer, stain and odour blocker. It's designed to block all stains, including water, nicotine and mould, and it expertly seals, unlike Zinza Bin, interior and exterior. Now, I can hand on heart say that I've used this product regularly in my own business and it performs excellently. Fully endorsed. Go and check out Zinza Bin Aqua. Let's get back to the episode.
yeah. I mean, it's definitely not your usual entrance into decorating, I'd say.
Mm,
Um, but I mean, when I was about 21, my dad is Dutch. He was born in the Netherlands, and they moved over to Canada when he was little. Then he went back as a teenager and did an apprenticeship in engineering technology.
okay.
And he loved his time doing his apprenticeship. And he said, "Why don't you go to the Netherlands? We've got loads of family there. You could go stay with them, and you could go and do an apprenticeship in decorating." And I was like, I don't speak Dutch. And my mum at this point was like, "You've just got 2 university degrees. What are you doing?" She's like, "Why don't you give teaching a try first?" And I was like, "Ooh, but I quite like decorating." But it was so I was like, "Oh, I'll give teaching a shot."
Mm,
And that's how I ended up here. There were no jobs in Canada. Um,
okay. So how long have you been
so
in the UK? How long did you live in Canada?
so uh, I sort of bounced around a lot. I grew up in Canada, in a place called North Bay, Ontario. It's 4 hours drive north of Toronto, and Canadians always measure distance in time. It's a
Right.
weird way of doing it because it's so big. Um, so it's a pretty it's not a very big community. There's only 53,000 people. Um, and I wanted to become a teacher, but at the time there was just like the marketplace was flooded with teachers. It was one of the
Mm,
most desirable jobs you can imagine, which is so funny because here it's like the least desirable job on earth. Um, and I couldn't get into teachers college, so I applied to do my teaching degree in Australia. So when I was 22, I moved to Australia. I moved to the Gold Coast and I got my teaching qualification. And I met this Australian over there, and she was like, "Let's go to England." And I was like, "Absolutely not. Sounds like a shit idea." Because I didn't want to come to England ever. My school had run a trip to England when I was a teenager, and I was like, "No, it's cold, it's wet, it's like not me at all."
sounds
Um,
accurate.
and everybody who's done an exterior this year will realize that I'm absolutely right.
Hmm.
Um, so I really didn't want to come, but my mum was like, "Don't come back here. You won't get a teaching job." And my mum was a head teacher, so she knew. She was like, "You absolutely will not be able to get a job. So go be with your friend in England." So in 2010, I moved here, so 14 years ago, and it was only supposed to be for 2 years, and
Oh,
that was
wow.
that was a stretch. I really didn't even want to make it to the 2 years. I wanted to move
Yeah.
back to Australia, and So, we lived, it was so grim. We lived in a hostel in Bayswater, like, which she thinks Bayswater sounds
Wow.
nice. Bayswater in London. What a swish place. No, it was a shithole. It didn't even have a kitchen. There was nowhere to eat. We were in bunks, and I remember there were like a room with like six beds, and there was like a plumber staying in one of the beds. There was like this Australian backpacker who used to come in drunk every night, and my friend and I shared a bunk, and we were getting up every morning and getting the train to these schools. Like, I was working at a school in Essex, in
That's mad.
Ingatestone.
Yeah.
So I was having to like, take a 50-minute train journey out to Essex every morning. And she was working, she was working in Essex as well. And I was at a nice school, she was at a shit school. But we were like waking up at like 2 in the morning to these people coming home from nights out.
Yeah.
Um, and then, yeah, I eventually, we found a flat eventually in Clapham Junction. And I lived there for a year. And then I was like, no, I'm moving back to Australia. And I had a boyfriend at the time, and I moved out there to be with him, and that all ended badly. And somehow I ended up back here. It's like the cat that came back. Um, and I worked at a school in Bracknell, and I sort of begged them to take me back, and they did because they were short on science teachers, and they hadn't managed to replace me. So yeah, they offered me my job back, and I stayed at that school for 8 years. They sponsored me to stay in the country twice.
Okay.
Um, I met my husband,
There you
and then
go. So it all played out in the end.
yeah, and that was yeah. I met my husband in 2012. Just at the time, I had renewed my visa to stay, and I was like, well, I'm staying. I may as well get a boyfriend. Um, so I did three things that year. I got a mobile phone contract, which I hadn't done before. Um, I
Big
got a
commitment.
boyfriend, and I bought a car, which actually was probably the biggest deal, because I had to drive on the wrong side of the road. Um,
The right side of the road, Heather. Everybody else drives on the wrong side.
well, technically, you drive on the left, so.
True
Uh,
that. Yeah, 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 yeah. If you're going to be
um,
pedantic.
so yeah, 2012 was like a big year, where it was like I really did actually commit to this country.
Mm,
Um, and then yeah, so I've been here since 2010, which nobody expected. Everybody, my whole life had told me Heather's a homebody. She'll never leave. And she will go teach at the high school that she went to, and she'll buy her parents' house, and that was what people told me. And I think I was just
mm,
determined to not be those things, and I've always been determined to not be what people say of me. Uh, so
okay.
yeah,
I
so yeah,
take it
14.
now, having children here and being married, you've got roots, or is there any plan to ever go back?
I don't think we'll ever go back. The reason, so my husband was really open to going to Canada. He loves it there. He would absolutely stay there. But I didn't want to go back.
Right.
Um, I and every time we go back, I love seeing my family and I love seeing friends. But I love the freedom of Heathrow being 25 minutes away. That I can just hop on a flight that
Mm,
doesn't cost me the earth to leave the country. Whereas if you're in Canada, the price of a flight to get to Europe, it starts at $1,000. Whereas I can go to Amsterdam for £100.
yeah.
Um, so it was just that was sort of the real draw for staying here. And my career, my adult career was here. My kids were born here. We have a house here. We're just kind of here now.
Mm.
Um, and you notice that I have an accent. I have a funny accent. Um, my accent is neither Canadian or English. And so when I go to Canada, people are like, "Oh my God, you sound so English." And then people here are like, "What are you? Are you Scottish? Are you Australian? What? Are you South African?" So I get lots of that. Um, So
Unique, Heather. Unique.
uh, definitely unique, different breed. Um, but no, I'd say this feels more like home. Whenever I do go home to Canada now, I think, oh, I don't really feel like I belong here.
Mm,
Um, and I love it, and I love visiting, but it's definitely not my home. Um, it was nice to go home this summer, but it was short, shorter than expected.
yeah.
But yeah, I didn't feel the draw to come back and stay there. Because you know
It's
what,
good.
with
I mean,
modern,
I'm glad that's yeah. I'm glad that's the case. You know,
yeah,
I'm glad you've settled and feel that way because I guess there'd always be a longing otherwise, wouldn't there?
yeah, and I'd say actually my husband is more like, let's move to Canada, and I'm like, no, let's not. It's a big
Yeah.
upheaval, especially since our kids are in school now. It's like,
Mm,
you'd have to like sever all their friendships to move them across the world, and that's kind of a big deal for little kids.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's definitely not on my list of things to do in the future. Um, but yeah, so yeah, I've been here 14 years. It's not where I plan to be, but I'm here and I enjoy it. And I've got this business that I didn't ever think I'd have. And yeah, my life definitely didn't take the shape I thought it would be taking. And
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. That seems to be a little bit of a theme that's carried you around, really. I mean, everything that you've just said and explained about sort of sounds great, and I didn't realise that your business was only like in its first year either prior to this conversation. Um, Obviously, when you reached out to me
yeah,
and you asked me, would I have any prize for this raffle and for the particular reason for the raffle, there's another big curveball that's been thrown your way, isn't there?
yeah, I mean, yeah, curveball's a good way of putting it. So I asked you to donate to a raffle for breast cancer now.
Mm,
And I explained in that message that I had, oh, this is where I'll cry as well. Uh, I'm going to try
that's
really
okay.
hard not to. Um, on the 24th of July, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. Just to give you a bit of an idea about me, I am 38 years old, and I never smoked, don't really drink. Um, go to the gym 2 or 3 times a week. In the last year, have run a half marathon.
Mm,
Um, I'm a healthy person. I work a really
yeah,
physical job.
yeah, yeah,
I have
yeah.
no risk factors for cancer in my family. Not nobody has ever had cancer. So to say it came as a shock is like the understatement of the century. It was just like one day I just rolled over in bed and I found a lump, and that was it. Life changed pretty instantly.
Mm,
Um, so yeah, and it's been a roller coaster, put it that way. So there's kind of a timeline to it because it all happened really, really quickly. So most of you, if you follow me on Instagram, would have known that in July, um, I was planning to go to Canada. And I did go to Canada, and you saw the photos of me in Canada and the videos of me in Canada. Those were real. I didn't make those
mm,
up. Um, but what happened is we were planning to go to, so I was taking the kids to Canada on July 19th. But at midnight on so it had just gone to July 17th, so Wednesday. I literally rolled over in bed and because I sort of tucked my hand to the side and I just felt
mm.
a lump. Um, and you can imagine it's midnight. I'm like, oh my God, I can't do anything about this, but I've definitely found a lump. Um, and I just panicked. I just remember thinking, oh my God, we're going to Canada in 2 days. What do I even do? And I rang my
Oh
sister
shit.
who lives in Canada and I said, I don't know what to do. And she said, it's midnight, you can't do anything. So she was like, just calm down, it's okay, you're fine. You know, let's just deal with the information we have right now, is that you have a lump, but you don't know anything about it. It could be nothing.
Mm.
And she just tried to calm me down. And she said, "You're probably not going to sleep tonight." And she was right. I didn't sleep. But I kind of just went. So I talked to her for about half an hour, and she got me nice and calm. And I was like, "Okay, I'm going to try and just rest." And she said, "Just put a film on or something and see where that gets you." Um, and obviously, I wasn't going to be able to sleep, was I? So I just remembered, um, like after I got off the phone with her, I thought, "Oh my God, my husband has private health cover through his work, um, and we get private GP access." And I was like, "I'm going to look on the app and see, what appointments they have." So, I'm there at like just gone midnight, probably like closer to 1 in the morning. And I'm logging through this app, and it says book an appointment, 24-hour access appointments. And they ask you to fill in like a little questionnaire about what your symptoms are and that sort of thing. And it asks you to choose a slot for uh, an appointment time. So they had appointments between 2 and 6 in the morning.
Oh
So I was
wow!
like,
What, like virtual appointments would it be?
yeah. So
Like
it was the
online?
GP that rings you.
Okay.
So I chose 2 to 6 in the morning, and he rang me at 2:45. Um, and I think at that point I had literally just dozed off. I was watching. I don't even know what I was watching. I put something on, and I'd managed to doze off. And I put my phone on as loud as I could get it, so that I woke up. And I woke up and started explaining to the GP what was happening. And he said, obviously, it would be better if I could see the lump, if I could feel it and understand, whether it was fixed or whether it was mobile, where it was.
Mm.
Um, and he said, but I'm going to trust you, knowing your body, that you do have a lump, and I'm going to give you an urgent referral. He said, but I'm a private GP. I can't give you a referral to the NHS. I can only give you a referral to the private system. He said, getting cancer treatment through the private system is, it's not as fast as you think it would be. And I was like, I'm just going to have to
Right.
take that risk. Um, so he sent me the referral like 15 minutes later. Um, and by that point, I had found a rapid access clinic in Windsor, which is about 25 minutes away from me, at the hospital where I was already an outpatient. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to ring them in the morning. And I could actually see from their online booking system that they had a clinic running that day. So, but all the appointments were blocked out. So I
Mm.
was like, I wonder if I can get an appointment for that. You can see how my mind was working. I'd just gone into like complete planning mode. And then, strangely enough, my son woke up, which he never does. And this is this is kind of a bizarre turn to the story. And he said to me, "I can't walk." And I was like, "Well, you don't need to walk, buddy. It's the middle of the night. Go to sleep. Like, you don't need to walk right now."
Yeah.
Um, and he went back to sleep. And then he woke up again at 5, which was bizarre. And he said, "I can't walk." And he went back to sleep. And then he didn't wake up again. So I usually wake up, say, 7 o'clock. And I went through to I had slept in the other room because I couldn't sleep. And I went through to my husband and I said, "I found a lump. I've been referred to a breast screening clinic to see what this lump is. And I'm going to try and get an appointment." I said, "Can you get the kids ready for school, and take them to school if you need to?" So he went through to wake my son up, and he was still asleep, which was really bizarre for him. He's like at 6:15 on the dot, he's up and whizzing around
Yeah.
his room, causing chaos. And he said, "I've woken him up, and he's covered in a rash, and he can't walk." And I said, "What do you mean he can't walk?" And he said, "He can't bear any weight on his legs." And so we're like, let's park this lump for a second. What do we
Wow.
do? So the GP wasn't open yet. So our GP is one of those ones, 8 o'clock in the morning, you ring the number, you join that queue of 58
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
people. And luckily, got through straight away, and they said, bring him down right now. So we had to divide and conquer because we've got two kids. So my husband took him to the GP, and I got my daughter ready for school. But weirdly enough, that day I had an appointment to go see a gynecologist at that clinic, at the same hospital that was running that breast screening clinic. So I called the gynecologist's secretary and I said, you wouldn't happen to know about the booking system at the hospital? I said, I'm trying to get an appointment with this consultant to get into this clinic. And she said, I don't have any access to their diary, but this is the direct booking line that we as secretaries use. Give
Right.
them a ring. It doesn't open until 9 o'clock, but I happen to know they start answering the phones from 8:30. So this secretary has just done me, the biggest favor of all time. Anyways, I got my daughter off to school, through the gate, and at 8:45 I sat in my truck and I rang this number. And so I rang her. I said, have you got an appointment in the rapid access clinic with Miss Shropshire? And she said, I've got one appointment left at 4:15. Would that work for you? And I said, absolutely. So I was like, I'll be there. So while this is all happening, my husband has taken my son to the GP. Two separate GPs have looked at him and they've said, we don't know what this is, but we're concerned it's something quite sinister.
Yeah.
And they managed to deduce that it was something in his hip. And because of what I did for a living, I kind of had an idea of what it could be. And I said, make sure you ask them if they think he has an infection. I said, he's got tracer marks on him. He's got a rash. He could very easily have a staph infection.
Right.
And by that point, my husband was like, actually, the rash is gone now. They're not concerned about a staph infection, but he's not able to bear any weight on his hip because we weren't sure whether it was his ankle or his knees.
Yeah.
And they said they think it's his hip. So anyways, they gave him an urgent referral to A&E. And so off they went to A&E. So I was just at home by myself for hours, what felt like hours. It was really hours. And in that time I had to ring a friend to say, can you pick my daughter up from school? And the friend I happened to ring, her mum died of breast cancer. So I felt quite guilty ringing her, saying, can you pick my daughter up from school? Because I have to go to this breast screening clinic to make sure that I don't have breast cancer. But she was like, oh my God, I'll pick her up. I'll keep her all night if you need me to. And so I arranged all that. And then my husband sort of rang me at 3 p.m. He said, they've done everything. They've x-rayed him. They've done blood tests. They're pretty confident he's just got this thing called transient synovitis, which is harmless. It's just like an acute pain in the joint. And it just goes away over time. He just needs to put weight on it to improve it.
Hmm.
So that was like a massive, massive relief. But then at about the time that he got released, it was time for me to sort of march off to hospital. So I took myself to hospital, which in hindsight was a very bad idea. But at this point, I was still fairly optimistic. I was like, oh, I'm 38, I'm young.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal. It's probably just hormonal or something like that.
I guess, I mean, there's all sorts of things like, I guess, cysts and things like that that could have been
Yeah, exactly.
less
And
less sort of malicious.
yeah, exactly. So I didn't have it. It was never anything that crossed my mind. And I got there, and my consultant, I know this now because I've spent a lot of time with her, is notoriously late.
Right.
Um, so I sat there for a very, very long time. So I think my appointment was at 4:15, and I don't think I got seen until like 5:30. So it was a long, long wait in the waiting room. But then I went to see her, and she asked me my age, my family history, all this other stuff. Did you breastfeed your kids? All these questions that remove all the risk factors for you.
Mm.
And she had a look, she had a feel, and she said, I'm going to send you for an ultrasound. And the radiologist is going to do that, a consultant radiologist. And so, off I trot. And I just thought to myself, this consultant radiologist is just going to tell me it's okay. She's going to tell me it's a cyst or it's like glandular or something like that, hormonal. She called me in and I could see the woman's face drop. It was just like within minutes of that ultrasound, it became very, very somber in the room. And at one point, she
Right.
turned to the radio tech and she said, "Could you see if Andrea's here? I need to order a mammogram." And I was like, "Oh my God!" And she'd been really digging around for a good 20 minutes.
Mm.
She'd had a check of my lymph nodes. She'd spent about 20 minutes on this side, and then she did a little quick check on this side and obviously hadn't seen anything, and then came back to this side. Um, and they said, so she shut off the machine and she said, I'm going to send you for a mammogram now. And then when you come back from that, you're going to have a biopsy. And then, so
All
I
in the
went for
same
my,
day.
yeah, so that's the whole point of
Wow.
this rapid access clinic is that it's like a
Right.
one-stop shop for breast cancer screening.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
and bearing in mind, I'd only found the lump at midnight and this is 6 o'clock
Yeah,
at night.
that's what I mean. This all seems mega quick. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a hell of a lot for you to take in on the day, but I mean, it's good that it is that quick.
But
But I
I
guess,
just
yeah,
didn't
it
have a
moving that
chance.
fast.
I didn't have a chance to process anything. So I went in for my
Mm.
mammogram, which, at the age of 38, that's not something you think about at all. Um, Very bizarre experience. Um, and she didn't say much to me at all. Um, and then I went back, they put you in a little cubicle in your dressing gown. And then the breast care nurse came to see me, who is one of my breast care nurses now, Katie. And she said to me, You said you were going on a trip to Canada. And I said, Yeah. And she said, I think you might want to cancel that. Um, and I didn't, at that point, I'm still like really optimistic about this. I don't know why. Just like
Wow.
complete false confidence or denial. I don't know. And I said, No, no, I think I will go. And I said, it's been planned for a long time, and it's to see family, and I'll just fly home if I have to. Um, and I just the way she spoke to me, I should have just right then and there known, I had cancer. And then
Mm.
the next thing, I was bounced into a room with the radiologist again, and they said, okay, we're going to do your biopsy now. And it's, there's effectively four different biopsies. Well, not four different biopsies. They took four samples. So I had a swollen lymph node. So they took a needle cell biopsy of that. So that's like a needle right into your armpit. No anesthetic or anything like that.
Mm.
Um, and then a core biopsy, and they do two samples so that they can see any variations. So for that one, they did put anesthetic in, thankfully. But you're very aware of what's happening. Um, and through all this, I was thinking to myself, I've got an appointment with a gynecologist at 6 o'clock. Can somebody tell the gynecologist that I'm going to be late? It's in the same building.
Yeah.
Um, and they were like, I don't think you should go to that appointment. And I was like, what do you mean I shouldn't go? I need to go. Um, so anyways, they told the gynecologist and I was like, okay, I'm going to go to the appointment. And they put me in a room to recover because they were like, just go easy with that because it's frozen now, but you're going to feel very sore
Yeah.
shortly. And they put me in like a little recovery to wait for my appointment with the other consultant. And I just lost it. At that point, everything just sunk in. I was like, "Wait, what has just happened? This has all happened in the space of 45 minutes." Um, and I just I couldn't get hold of my husband because he was still trying to like sort the kids out. And I rang my best friend Kerry, and I said, I think I think you're gonna have to come here. I don't think I can do this by myself. I don't think I can drive my car home. And I had my truck as well.
Mm.
And with all my decorating stuff in the back as well, because I hadn't cleared it out yet. Um, and she was like, "Oh my God, I'll be there in a second." So she drove out, and she basically acted as my next of kin. She spoke to the nurses, she spoke to everyone,
Mm.
and they told her sort of what the next steps were. Um, and in the car on the way home, she was just telling me stuff, and I couldn't take any of it in. Um, so it was probably the most bizarre day of my life. Um, and also worth saying, we didn't have any family that could help that day because it happened to be my husband's grandmother's funeral. So
Oh,
it was like bad things really do come in threes. On that day for us, they
yeah.
really did. So my sister-in-law was away, and we don't have much family here anyways. We've got my mother-in-law and my sister-in-law, and that's it. Um, and they were at this funeral all day. So it was really just us. Um, so I got home, I think I got home around like 8 o'clock at night. And I was just like, I don't, I don't even know what to do. I didn't know what to do with myself. Um, but because we had this holiday and I was determined to go on this holiday and I was determined for my kids to go on this holiday, I was like, okay, let's pack our bags. Because I hadn't packed yet to go on holiday. So I just kind of put it out of my head. They said it will take 5 business days for you to get your biopsy results.
Yeah.
Um, so I just decided to not think about it, and I really did mostly not think about it because I was too busy to think about it. I had to pack up all the kids' stuff. I had to pack up everyone's stuff because this was a big trip. And then we were leaving at like 6 in the morning on Friday morning, so it was just like boom, boom, boom. And then we got to Canada, and it was like straight on the ground. It was a 4 hour drive to get up to my hometown, and then
Mm.
we've like I was determined to keep the kids awake so that they would sleep that night, and everyone just planned everything so that I I didn't have a chance to think. Um, and then so we arrived on the Friday night, and then on Wednesday morning, it's one of those moments you never really forget. I stood at the coffee maker in my mum's kitchen, and my phone rang, and I didn't recognize the number, and I thought, shit. Um, and this, so I answered the phone, um, and my consultant was on the phone, and she said she sort of like did that small talk thing and asked me how my holiday was and all this other stuff, and she said, um, "Do you want to know your results now, or do you want to wait until you come back from Canada?" And I said, "I don't come back from Canada until August 17th." And she said, "Ah, it's a bit long to be waiting for those results." Um, she said, "So we found abnormal cells, which is a very, very nice way of saying cancer."
Yeah.
Um, and so um, she said, "Do you want to wait until you come back?" And she said, "Actually, no, it's too late for you. It's too long to wait for you to come back. We need you to come back sooner." Um, so I said, "How soon do you want me back?" And she said, "Well, that's up to you. Ideally in the next week or so." Um, so I said, she explained everything to me. She said, "You've got grade one um,
Mm.
uh, invasive ductal cancer, um, and your tumor is 3 centimeters. And from what we can see in the mammogram, basically, and from the biopsy, so grade one, 3 centimeters, um, and the lymph node biopsy came back negative, so we're not seeing it in the lymph nodes, which was a good sign. And she was really positive. She said, what we'll basically do is we'll do a lumpectomy, which is just removing the lump.
Mm.
And then the plan is to give you radiotherapy. She said, this is a really, really treatable cancer. You're going to live for a long time. So it was
Right.
really, to be told you have cancer, but then all this really positive stuff is great. So I kind of went away, and I was devastated, but I could see some good in what she was saying to me. Um, and if you don't know anything about breast cancer, grade 1 is really non-aggressive. It's like the least
Mm.
aggressive form of cancer. Um, so I was like, okay, this is good. Anyways, I got off the phone, phoned my husband, um, and he said, well, what do you want to do? Because I'm obviously in Canada. He's in England. I'm in Canada. The kids are in Canada with me.
Yeah.
Uh, and I said, well, I don't really know when to come back. I said, every part of me just wants to leave now and get there as soon as I can to get the ball rolling. But I
Mm.
also don't want to just leave the kids here. So I ended up calling the breast care nurse, and I said, when can I be seen? When's the soonest I can be seen? Like, what are the next steps? And when can they happen, basically?
Yeah.
So she said, next thing you need to do is have an MRI. Um, and the next available MRI is on Tuesday, the 30th. So they told me I had cancer on the 24th of July. So I was like, okay, I can work with that. So I wanted to stay with the kids as long as I could and try and enjoy some of the time. So I ended up staying until Sunday the 28th, 20, I don't know, something like that. Um, uh, but, in true fashion, nothing goes to plan when you try and book a flight to come home. So we had originally booked our flights with Lufthansa, and they were having none of it. They were honestly quite awkward about everything. Um, I
In what
ended
respect,
up,
trying to change it?
yeah. So I had flights that
Right.
allowed changes. I didn't have one of those
Okay.
flights where there was no changes or cancellations or anything. They were like,
Mm.
you have to pay £150 rebooking fee. And I'm like, I don't care. Throw money at this problem. We'll just cross that bridge when we get
Mm.
there. But they were so incompetent about it that I think I probably spent 10 hours on the phone with them. They kept issuing me a ticket, but not an e-ticket. So I actually didn't exist on the flight. Um, and it took me 3 days to rebook the flight, probably 10 hours on the phone, what amounted to a £705 phone bill from EE.
Shit.
Um, and then I eventually did 24 hours before the flight was about to take off, managed to get an e-ticket and get a seat on the flight. Um, so unfortunately, the last 3 days I spent in Canada were not, I didn't get to spend time with the kids really because I
Mm.
spent so much time back and forth with Lufthansa. Um, and that was like very stressful. And at that point, my husband was in Berlin. Um, so he was hard to get a hold of. But luckily, I was with my mum. My sister had arrived at that point and she was helping. And I've got loads of family in Canada. My aunt and uncle were like, we'll take the kids. You do whatever you have to do. And so there was just like this team of people around me in Canada, just like making sure that I could do what I needed to do to get home. So I got home. I flew home. Somehow the like flight gods were with me and I got a whole row to myself and just managed to quite literally drug myself to sleep for 7 hours with anti-nauseants. And then,
Right.
and then,
Heather's
yeah, I got
tips for sleeping on a plane.
exactly. Make yourself look really unapproachable and give yourself anti-nauseant drugs. Um, So I got home. My husband picked me up from the airport. Um, we couldn't even really talk to each other. It was like, what do you even say at this
Mm,
point? Um, and then yeah, because at this point I have to like reiterate, I felt absolutely fine. There was never a sign that I had anything wrong with me. It was just a fluke that I found this lump.
yeah.
Um, so I got home on a Monday, and then on Tuesday I went for my MRI, which was a I. When I say I've never had anything wrong with me in life, I've the only time I've ever spent any time in the hospital is I stayed overnight when my daughter was born, and that was it. So, and I have two kids. I've only been in
Mm,
hospital overnight once. My son was born at home, uh, and I didn't ever go to hospital when he was born. Uh, I've literally, there's never ever been anything wrong with me in life. Uh, so yeah, I went for the MRI, which was, if you've ever had an MRI, you realize it's one of the loudest, most
yeah,
unsettling experiences of your life. And I'm not
I've had a
claustrophobic,
few.
so I wasn't that worried. But a breast MRI is something special. So
Mm,
you get you get there and they're like, okay, you need to lay face down. And there's two holes in the thing, and they're
right.
like, okay, slot yourself in these holes. Uh, and then for 45 minutes, they put earplugs in your ears. You've got your noise cancelling headphones that you can't hear anything from, anyways, and you just hear chung 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 chung. Um, and then 20 minutes in, they said, okay, we're gonna inject you with the tracer, uh, and that was kind of it. Um, and then the next day, I met with the breast surgeon. So the radiologist sort of went over my MRI, and I met with the breast surgeon since the first that and that was the second time I'd seen her uh, since I'd found the lump, and that was that was when we realized things were a bit different. And she said,
Mm,
uh, I think actually she's very, very polite and very well spoken. She said, I think it would be prudent if we talked about maybe the possibility of mastectomy. And I think at that point, I just lost it. I was like, sorry,
yeah.
what? This this isn't what we talked about on the phone. Um, she said, and she sort of showed me where the cancer was. And she said the radiologist has had a look and she thinks that your tumor is a little bit bigger than what we talked about. Um, and she and I said, but what about a lumpectomy? Why can't you take it out with a lumpectomy? And I was really, really clinging to this lumpectomy, because I felt like it was going to give me the most, normal look after having this surgery. And she
So
said,
just to explain, I mean, I'm aware because, as I said, I've had this in my own family, but just for
yeah,
anyone that's listening that might not know the terminology, a
yeah.
mastectomy. Can you explain what a mastectomy is, Heather?
So, first of all, a lumpectomy is what most people get, which is just removing the lump,
Yeah.
or the tumor, the cancerous tissue. A mastectomy removes all of the breast tissue. So, and you get different types of mastectomy. So you have a full mastectomy, which quite often you'll see images of this on, like, Dove does a beauty campaign where they have a woman who's had a mastectomy, and you just see a line,
Mm,
um, and you can see the stitch, um, and they've left nothing.
yeah.
And then you have uh, so you can have a mastectomy with reconstruction, which is what I had. And then even within those, there's different types. So there's um, some mastectomies, they will reconstruct from your own tissue. So they
Mm,
take muscle from your back. They're sometimes called angel wings. they take muscle, or they'll take fat from inside your thigh, and
Mm.
tissue from your stomach, and reconstruct it using your own tissue. And then they'll do an implant. And there's different types of implant. There's implants that they put under your muscle and they have to gradually fill them. There's silicone implants, which is what I have. And then there's difference in the skin that they leave behind. So I had what is called a skin sparing, nipple sparing mastectomy with immediate reconstruction and
Mm.
sentinel node biopsy. So big surgery, really.
That's a mouthful, yeah.
And what they did is basically all the skin of the breast is left there. There's so sorry, I'm going to show you my boobs. Not actually, but so mine has.
Oh, sorry, right. I was just going to say that, yeah.
I'm not going to take my shirt off. I have a 10 centimeter incision that runs from there
Mm.
to there, and basically the whole surgery goes from that incision. They remove
Right,
all the breast tissue, not just the cancerous tissue. They remove all of the breast tissue, leaving literally just the skin and the nipple.
right.
Um, and I mentioned the sentinel node biopsy. So your lymph nodes are all in like clusters around your armpit.
Mm.
So the day before my surgery, they inject a radioactive tracer into your nipple, and the idea is to see where that moves, to see how the cancer spreads.
Okay.
Um, and they biopsy and see where the first lymph node is, to
Mm.
see, because it would logically spread to the first lymph node.
Yeah.
Um, so that lymph node is, roughly about there. Um, and I kept saying after my surgery, "Where's the incision for that?" And she's like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, there's no stitches or anything." And she said, "Oh, there's no incision there. We did it all through the same hole." And I was like,
Wow.
"Oh." Um, so yeah, that, it gives you an idea of the kind of recovery you have. But I'll talk about that in a
Yeah.
bit. But so yeah, that is when she sort of floated the idea of a mastectomy to me. And I was not happy.
Yeah.
I went home and there were a lot of tears that night.
I can only begin to imagine. I would imagine having that news and going from the hope of the small operation to a mastectomy must have been just utterly devastating.
Yeah, and I think, after this, have a Google of what a mastectomy looks like. Google
Mm.
Images does this really dirty. I looked and I was devastated. I was like, is that what I'm going to end up looking like? And I couldn't, basically I just felt like anything that made me feminine was being absolutely stripped away.
Mm.
Um, and it just, yeah, it like knocked the wind out of my sails. So, but they sort of explained to me why it had to happen. They said, look, we can do a lumpectomy, and if that's what you choose, we'll do it. Um, but we need to get 1 millimeter's margin, and that means we have to have 1 millimeter around the tumor that is clear
Mm.
of cells. And they said, and if we don't get that, we go back as many times as we need to, until you get to a mastectomy. And what that means is
Yeah.
every time we do that, you have to go under general. We have to reopen a new wound for you, um, and you have to recover each of those times. And I was kind of like, oh, but I'm young. Um, and so I just went away. She was like, you don't need to make a decision now. We're going to send you for this thing called a PET CT. And it's going to light you up like a Christmas tree to see where the cancer is. So we really do have all the information. Um, so at that appointment, it's worth saying that appointment happened to fall on my 9-year wedding anniversary. Um, so we walked away from that one, and it was pretty somber. That is not how you want to spend your wedding anniversary.
Mm.
And so they said, we'll get you this appointment at this hospital to have this PET CT to see if there's any metastasis. Um, to see if it spread to anywhere else in your body, because that was still like a pretty looming concern.
Yeah.
Um, so that was booked for 2 days later. But at this point, so my husband was supposed to be flying to Canada on Thursday morning. So on the, I think it was the first of August, and so he, I said, you have to go. You have to be with the kids. They have to have a normal holiday. I've already left them in a strange country. I had to give my mum um, legal guardianship signed over
Mm.
by a solicitor to take care of the kids. You need to go out there. And so he went, and so he left on the 1st of August, and that was it. I was on my own. So I took myself, and it's probably worth mentioning, I haven't been alone for like 8 years. I've got kids. There's never a moment
Yeah, of
where you're
course.
alone.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I live in a fairly big house, and it felt cavernous. It just felt huge.
And just, I think, just to mention, because if anyone's listening to this, like in the future, just to give a key for timescale, because we're mentioning dates. So we're currently recording on the 18th of September, and you're talking about August. So this is all very, very recent, very, very
Yeah,
fresh.
yeah. So, um, yeah. So from the time I found the lump, July 17th, we're now at August 1st, and yeah, my husband flew to
Mm.
Canada, and then on the 2nd, I went into hospital to have this PET CT. So another, it's like an MRI, but yeah, this time I had to have a radioactive tracer injected into me. And I wasn't allowed to exercise before that. So basically, this radioactive tracer, um, it has glucose in it, and
Mm.
cancer is fed by sugar. So the idea is that this sugar goes straight to your cancer, and this CT scanner will be able to pick up the areas where this active cancer is. Um, you're not allowed to exercise before it, because otherwise your muscles try to eat up all the glucose, and it looks like you have cancer in your muscles. Um,
Okay.
so I went to this by myself, and again, they're always very, very somber at these appointments. Um, so had that appointment, left, came home, and then on the Monday, the secretary rang me, and she said, "Oh, we have your results from your CT scan. Can you come down?" Didn't say anything else. So I'm like, "What's going on?" So I drove down straight away, and it was basically to confirm that the tumor was just too big to do a lumpectomy. Um, so, but funnily enough, at that point, on the Friday when I went for this scan, my neighbor had had breast cancer 2 years earlier, and she had messaged me as I'm driving to the scan. My phone flashes up, and it said something like, "You might want to buy these before your surgery." And I got to the hospital, and I look at it, and it's one of these chicken fillets for your inside your bra, and I was
Mm.
like, "No." That was the deciding factor. That was the exact moment where I thought, I am absolutely not having a chicken fillet in my bra for the rest of my life. I will get a mastectomy. Um, and so when I drove to that appointment on Monday or whenever it was, I walked into the appointment with the consultant, and I said, "I'd really like a mastectomy." And she was a bit like, "Sorry, what?" And I said, "But I want you to give me a new boob straight away." And I said, "And I want to keep my nipple." And I was very like, the decision was made, it needed to happen.
Yeah.
Um, and she said, "Okay." And she was just very much like, "I can make that happen for you." Um, and I said, "Actually, I really want a double." And she was like, "Okay, we're not talking about that side right now. That doesn't have cancer. Um, but we'll talk about that when we're through this surgery. Right now, all we care about is cancer." And I was like, "Okay, fair enough." And because I had no family history and I hadn't been genetic tested yet, they were like, "We don't want to touch that side. Let's do this when it's
Yeah.
less emotive." Basically, is what she was saying
Yeah.
to me. Um, I said, "Okay, as long as we can do something to the other side to make it look similar." And she was like, "We'll do that. Don't worry." So that was it. And so at that point, I had a provisional date for my surgery, which was August 7th. Um, but they were still waiting on some test results. And unfortunately, I had this like strange situation with one of my test results, which doesn't happen very often, where it came back something called equivocal, which meant it was neither positive or negative. Basically, because the test wasn't accurate enough. So they had to send it off to the University College of London. They only tested in batches, so I was like the unlucky sod who was the first of the batch and had to wait for a bunch of other people who needed this test to have their samples submitted. So that one test really, really held things up. And so for a week I just waited. I heard nothing. Um, and then one day I just got a call. It was the following Monday actually, from the secretary, and she said, "Can you have surgery on Thursday?" She's very abrupt, and I really like her. And I was like, "Sorry, what?" She's like, "Can you have surgery on Thursday?" And I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "Can you go to the Runnymede Hospital?" And I was like, "Where is that? I don't even know where that is." Um, and it's in Chertsey, which is like an hour away from my house. And I was like, "I'll go anywhere. If you tell me to go to
Mm.
Liverpool, I will drive to Liverpool for this surgery. Like, you just tell me where I need to be and I'll be there." Um, but at this point, my family are all still in Canada. So I had to assemble basically a team of people who would be willing to take me to the hospital, for my surgery, and somebody who would be able to pick me up from the hospital, and somebody who could care for me after I'd had my surgery.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So it was confirmed that I would be having surgery on August 15th. And so from there, it was just a real whirlwind. It was, okay, you need to drive to this hospital for your pre-op, um, which was an hour away. And then, they ask you all these questions. And every time they ask me the questions, all these pre-op questions, it's like, do you have diabetes? Do you have any implants? Do you have all this other stuff? It was always no.
Mm.
Um, and then the next day I had to go get that injection into my nipple, which was at another hospital in Guildford, which is another hour away. And I think the most sort of poignant moment of that day was NHS hospitals are notoriously bad for parking, and I couldn't find a parking space anywhere.
That they are.
And
Yeah.
I happened to find my way into the oncology car park, um, and it said, "This car park is for oncology patients only, and it's free of charge." And I was like, "Well, I can't park here." And then I was like, "Wait a minute, I can park there. I have cancer." And it was like the aha moment of, holy shit, this is actually real. I have cancer and I'm
Yeah.
about to have a massive, massive surgery tomorrow. Um, and I just remember that was like when the penny dropped. Um,
Mm.
and so I remember that night coming home. I remember having like a big cry about it, and I was like, "Well, this is the last day I'm gonna have nice boobs." And what a really vain thing to think. I
Yeah.
remember saying to my surgeon, "I'm really sorry, but I'm a bit vain and I need to keep these boobs." And she was like, "That's not vain. That is like most people's number one concern."
Yeah,
Um,
I'm sure. I mean, look, at the end of the day, it's a part of you. Yes, obviously, breasts are unique to women, but
yeah,
I think, like me personally, if I look at myself, I'm quite attached to all of me. I don't think I'd really want any of it removed. So
yeah,
I don't think it's vain. And, you get used to your own. I always find surgery quite fascinating, particularly like cosmetic surgery. And I know this is a totally different subject because it's optional, but I always
To be
find it a
honest,
very
it's very
strange.
cosmetic.
Yeah, I always find it very strange when people choose to completely adjust like something about how they look.
Yeah,
Not that I question the decision, more that I always find I just think it must be mad to go sort of under anesthetic looking and being used to one thing and then waking up and seeing something different and having to get used to a different reflection in the mirror. So I can understand where you're coming from. I don't think there's any vanity there, Heather. I think, being attached to your parts is quite a normal, natural thing, and to not want to part with
yeah,
them.
no,
Yeah, I
and
mean, let's be honest here, it's shit, isn't it? It's through no fault of your own, and nobody
yeah,
wants to be given that news that the big C, the big, talk about cancer. It's still got that weird taboo where people kind of almost flinch when you say the word cancer.
yeah.
Um,
It's I haven't told many people I have cancer, um, because people treat you differently. It is
mm,
the second that word leaves your mouth, they're like, "Ooh, I don't, I don't even know how to speak to you anymore."
yeah,
Um, and not everybody's like that. Some people just treat you like a normal person, and that I can't tell you enough how important that is. My life has changed so much in the last 2 months. All I really want to be is Heather. I don't want to be
mm,
Heather with cancer. I just want to be Heather. And there's so little left from my old life, um, that when people start to treat you differently, you're like, hold on, I haven't done anything to deserve this. And yeah, people just don't really know what to do with that
mm.
information.
I
Um,
think you've just outlined that really well. And you're right, people don't know what to do. And I think a lot of the time it's more of a reflection on them and how uncomfortable they feel. Because I think most people, and certainly men probably in particular, your initial reaction if somebody tells you something like that, there's a problem, how do I fix it? And when
yeah,
somebody tells you, I've got cancer, I can't fix that. Nobody can fix
no,
that. And being in that position of conversation where you then kind of have to just listen, a lot of people don't know how to do that. And if you can't offer a solution, or, well, do you know what, why don't you
mm,
try this, or why don't you try that? With cancer, I think everyone knows that unless they're the surgeon, there is no do this, try that. I can fix it this way. Have you tried this?
you
And I think
do
that's where
other.
most people get really uncomfortable.
There's like one group of specific people that I find the hardest to deal with. And I'm sure you've talked about this before on your podcast, is the toxically positive people, who tell you, "Oh, you just put it out of your head. You have to just try and be happy." No, I actually just need to feel all my feelings is what I need to do.
Yeah,
You know, uh, I'd like to be happy. Don't get me wrong. I would really like to just exist and be happy all the time, but it's a very fluid thing. And some days I feel great and I'm really, really happy. And other days I'm like, the weight of this is just soul crushing.
mm,
Um, and I just need a bit of space and time to actually deal with that. And I'm a pretty pragmatic person. Um, but sometimes, like this weekend, on Sunday morning, I woke up and I said to my husband, I just need to go for a walk. I just need a bit of time to sort of like sort my head out. Um, and I just went out for an hour and a half, put my music in. There's nobody around, and I just kind of like sifted through my feelings a little bit because I was having a wobble. Um,
mm.
and that, but and I realized that's how I process it, but not everybody
That's
works
yeah.
the same way.
I
And
think
I
that's really
think,
normal.
you know, it's fine to be positive. It's great to be positive. But I think there is such thing as toxic positivity where people say to themselves, I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay, and then all of a sudden they're really not okay, rather
Yeah.
than just letting those feelings actually happen.
Well, I think
Um,
telling yourself that you're okay versus actually being okay are two different things. and
Yeah.
you can try and outwardly project positivity and project that you're okay, and it's almost like a desire, really. It's like, I'm going to tell everyone I'm okay in the hope that that becomes reality.
Yeah.
The truth is sometimes that just isn't the reality.
Yeah.
And you end up masking, and then, like you just said, then all of a sudden you fall apart, because the
Yeah.
truth is you have been masking the negative. Everybody, it's human nature, we all feel negative, and given your position and what you've been through, perfectly natural. And I would
Yeah.
say, not that I'm an expert, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a counsellor, I'm not a psychologist. I've studied a lot of these things. But you're still so fresh into it. And I
Yeah.
would imagine you're still going to have a long period to come of processing and dealing with the emotions that you've had to go
Yeah,
through in a
definitely.
short period of time.
Yeah, and I'm not even close to anywhere being done this. I've had
Yeah.
surgery, and that is the first step, but there's still a lot of other steps to go through. Um, but yeah, so I had my surgery, it was just over a month ago now. Um, but yeah, my neighbor had to take me because I was on my own.
Mm.
Uh, and she took me, and she said, and it was the morning was really funny. Um, we got to hospital. There's nobody there. It's a private hospital. And they were like, put this gown on backwards so we can draw on you. Go to the toilet, do a pregnancy test so we can make sure you're not pregnant. And I was like, oh my God, can you imagine? Um, couldn't think of anything worse. And put these anti-embolism socks on, these really tight green socks, and put these disposable underpants on. So my neighbor's like wetting herself at me in all this gear. And then my very always late to everything surgeon turned up, and she's like, she's a bit of a whirlwind. I really, really like her. I think she's just like a brilliant person. I love her sense of humor. I love everything about her. She's like the
Mm.
right person for me. And she like digs this pen out of her bag, and she's like, remind me which one I'm doing. So we like draw a big arrow right here. Um, and then she like marks me all up, and she goes, so are we going bigger? Are we going smaller? What do you want me to do here? And I was like, oh, same size. We'll go same size. Um, and she's like, so like a B cup? And I was like really insulted by this. I was like, I'm not a B cup. And my neighbor is just laughing. Just she thinks this is the funniest thing ever. And I was like, just do what you think looks good with the other one. And she's like, okay, leave it with me. And, I'm putting a lot of faith in this surgeon. Like, we haven't spent a lot of time talking about this.
Mm.
Um, and so she's like, yeah, be ready in 10 minutes. I just need to go get my scrubs on. And then they came and got me. And um, I had one nurse basically all the way through. She was called Victoria, and she was absolutely brilliant. We had a very similar sense of humor, and I'd say we're about the same age. And we were just cracking jokes. And so I walked down to the theatre, and they're like, get on this bed, and the anaesthetist was talking to me, and as he puts the cannula in, all of a sudden my heart rate just went sky high. And they were like, we're going to give you something to bring your heart rate down. And I started to cry. And then he was like, count back. It's time now. And I woke up, and I think it was like 4 or 5 hours later. I mean, time stops, doesn't it? You have no idea when you're under general. And I woke up in recovery, and I woke up to sort of a team of people around me, and I felt really sick, and they're like injecting me with all kinds of different drugs, and they're like, "Are you in pain? Do you feel sick?" And I just remember her like jabbing some anti-nausea into my leg, and then saying, "We've given you fentanyl. Are you still in pain?" And I was like, "Yeah, lots of pain." They were like, "We're gonna try some cocodamol." I said, "Don't, because I'll throw up everywhere." And then they were like, we'll give you morphine. They gave me morphine, and I just dozed off, but still felt in pain. And then we finally decided that the best drug for me was oxycodone. But it took about an hour and a half of like lots of really heavy drugs um,
Mm.
to figure out what was going to stop me feeling as much pain as I was in. Anyways, they wheeled me back to the room, and my neighbor was waiting for me. And I just kind of remember talking to her a bit and just sort of like going in and out of consciousness. And I just had this massive pressure dressing. So it sort of spanned from here to here and sort of wrapped all the way around me, and it was like quite a stiff dressing. So I had no idea, like you can't see anything. I'm in a hospital gown. Um, and so they're just like, they do regular checks on your like blood pressure, temperature, oxygen sats, and my blood pressure was like through the floor. It was like criminal how low my blood pressure was. And they said to me, "You lost a lot of blood in surgery." And I said, "How much is a lot?" And they said, "A liter and a quarter." Um, someone my size probably only has about 7 liters of blood in them.
Shit.
Um, so
I mean, that
they said,
sounds a
"We,
lot
yeah."
anyway. Like, yeah.
Well, the um the on-call doctor basically said, "I'm surprised you're doing as well as you are." Um, so they had to keep a real eye on my blood pressure, and I was supposed to go home the next morning. So I got out of surgery and I was back in my room by 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I was supposed to be leaving the next morning. And all through the night, my blood pressure was just too low. At one point, they tried to get me to go to the toilet.
Mm.
Firstly, I threw up all over myself, and then I fainted. Um, I just remember this like sheen of sweat hitting me, and then just not remembering anything. And they were like, "Okay." So they had an IV of fluids going to try and get my blood pressure a little bit higher. And then the next day they were like, "Can't go home, your blood pressure's too low." Um, and then so I spent another night, and then the next day they were like, "Okay, we're going to try again." So like, check my blood pressure, it's stable, it's good. Um, they'd had to move my cannula because my hand had all swollen up and it had moved out of place. So they'd moved it into my arm, and I really hate having a cannula. So I'd managed to convince the nurse to take it out. I said, "Oh, you're not giving me fluids anymore. Let's take this cannula out." I don't know why she listened to me, but she took the cannula out. Um, and they said, "We're just going to check your hemoglobin levels because you lost so much blood." And I remember very clearly the nurse saying, "There's something wrong here." And I was like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "I've been up walking around, I've been to the toilet, I've done all the things I'm supposed to do. I can go home now." And she said, "Well, your hemoglobin levels would suggest you're dead." Uh, and I was like, "Okay." Um, so the ward doctor came back. He was this brilliant man. Um, and he said, "Why have you not got a cannula?" And I said, "I made them take it out." He said, "Why'd you do that?" I said, "More importantly, why did the nurses not check with you before they took my cannula out? Why did they listen to me?" Um, and he said, "I have to put a new cannula in for you now." And I was like, ugh, couldn't think of anything worse. Anyways, he took my blood, it went off for a sample, and he said, "Your hemoglobin levels are way too low. I'm surprised you haven't fainted just from standing up. The amount of oxygen you're getting from your blood is not good." So he said, "You have to have a transfusion." So I had to have 2 units of blood, which is 2 bags of blood, transfused. And that takes a long time. It takes 3 hours per unit. So
Wow.
they were like, "You're going to have to stay in again." So in the end, I ended up staying for 3 nights. When I was supposed to go home within 24 hours. But by that point, my family had come home. So they thought they were coming home to me at home, but I was still in hospital. And so they drove out to see me. And, my 2 kids came into the room. They knew I'd had surgery, but I don't think they
Mm.
expected to walk in to a big bag of blood being transfused into their mum.
Oh, bless
And
them.
so my youngest is 5 and my eldest is 7. They've both had surgery, so they kind of understood what was going on.
Mm.
But that's a pretty, even having a transfusion yourself, you're like, oh, that's a bit grim. And meanwhile, on the BBC, they're talking about the tainted blood scandal, and you're like, this feels all a bit,
Timing. Mm.
all a bit raw. I mean, the tainted blood scandal was a long time ago, but it makes you feel
Yeah,
uh,
of course.
very aware of what's happening. Um, so yeah, it took 3 nights in the hospital before I was released. Um, and then yeah, they're like, all of a sudden they're like, okay, you can go now. Um, and you're supposed to just go and live your life like nothing's happened. So I remember my husband picking me up, and it was just a bit mad. Like, I've been in a really safe hospital where every 3 hours somebody comes and checks on me and checks all my stats and everything like that. And, the toilet's like 4 feet away from the bed, so it's not a big deal. You're in your own home, there's nothing medical in your own home.
Mm.
Um, I took up residence in the spare room because I have to sleep. Well, I don't anymore, but I basically had to sleep sitting up. Um, I had to sleep on my back and have this massive pressure dressing. I was supposed to have like pillows under each arm. And I basically just, the sleep was pretty elusive at the time. Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, it was, and you have to regularly take these painkillers because if they run out, you're like, oh my God. Um, you're very aware of everything.
Mm.
Um, and they sent me home with 5 days worth of painkillers. Um, because the painkiller I was on was a controlled substance, and they were like, we can't give you any more. Um, they said, if you need more, you're going to have to go to the GP and get him to prescribe them, which is what ended up happening. So I got to the end of the 5 days, and when I tell you I've never been in so much pain, I have never been in so much pain. We ended up having to go to the GP. He wrote me a whole new prescription. He was like, God, you should have been given at least 2 weeks. Um, but yeah, and also, meanwhile, you not just had this like life-changing surgery, you've also been under anesthetic for 4 hours,
Mm.
um, which has its own really wonderful set of side effects that take a long time to get over. Um, so yeah, it was just the first 2 weeks after were really hard, and because where they took the lymph node out, because of how they've done it, they've tunneled up essentially
Mm.
from this part right here all the way up to here.
Yeah.
Um, they damage all the nerves, so I have like a complete loss of sensation down this side of my arm, all the way to my back. Um, right here, I have no sensation. Um, there's no sensation. Like, this sounds very bizarre, but like you could literally draw a line, and I'd say, "Okay, stop. There's nothing there. I don't feel anything." Um, so you just have to get used to that. Plus, they send you home with a drain that is draining
Yeah.
any fluid from um, the surgery. So I've got this bottle that's like filled with blood that I have to carry around with me everywhere. With a nice little tube that's hanging out the bottom of my t-shirt. And they're basically saying, don't wear t-shirts. You need to wear anything that buttons at the front. And they gave me a bag to put my drain in to carry it around. Um, and on the first day I got home, my drain leaked. And I was like, oh God, I can't catch a break here. So ended up having to go back to hospital. Um, they changed my drain. All my whole like pressure dressing was filled with fluid. So they had to take the pressure dressing off. And at this point, when I say I was not ready to see what had happened down there, I was really not ready to see what had happened. Like, I did not want to know. And they were like, you have to have a look. Come on. Like, it's really important for you to see that things are actually quite normal down there. So it was like 3 or 4 days, 4 days after the surgery, I saw it, and oh, it was really hard to see. Like when they took the pressure dressing off, I was like, no, I don't really want to see it. I'm not ready for this. And they sort of stood me in front of a mirror and they said, look, just look, it looks all right. You know, you are okay, and it's not as gruesome as you think it is. And
Mm.
it really wasn't. You know, it was bruised, it was swollen. But all I had was like, there was no stitching. Everything was internally stitched, so you couldn't
Okay.
even see where the wound was. Um, my surgeon's amazing. So she is a pioneer in scarless surgery. So
Oh well,
um, yeah, there's no sign of any surgery or anything like that. She is truly
incredible.
amazing. Um, but yeah, so they were like, it's really important for you to be able to see that everything is okay and you're not disfigured and things. They said this is the worst it's ever going to look. You know, it's a bit bruised, and it's still all the surgery markings are there, so you can see this like dotted ring around and the arrow, and
Mm.
um, so it's all very raw. And so they like redressed the wound, gave everything a clean, sorted out, changed the drain, and they were like, "We're going to put a bra on you now." And I was like, "I don't have a bra. Um, all I've got is this massive pressure dressing." So they like off they scurry. These breast nurses, they're like the loveliest ladies ever. Came back with a bra for me, and it's called a post surgery bra. It does at the front. It's like all hooks at the front.
Mm.
It's like this really tight mesh that just feels like a straitjacket, and you have to wear it 24/7. Um, so yeah, I remember being like quite chuffed that I got to wear a bra. That was like, we're going somewhere. And the surgeon was like, I'm really happy with how you're healing so far. She said, it's unfortunate that the drain is leaked, but these things happen. They're vacuum sealed, and the vacuums obviously come undone. And they were like, come back on Friday and we'll take your drain out. So I was like, okay, off I trot. I came back on Friday. My sister-in-law took me, um, and they took this drain out, and I will describe this as I felt my soul leave my body. This was probably the most horrendous thing that has ever happened to me in my life, was this drain being removed. And I thought it was just like in like this much. No, it was like, so the hole is about right here for the drain, and it's stitched into
Mm.
place. They hold it, and the tubing's really, really fine. Um, and she said to me, I want you to take a deep breath in, and when I tell you to breathe out, you do a really long out breath. And I was like, okay. And my sister-in-law is holding my hand, which at this point I've got no top on, so my sister-in-law's seen every inch of me at this
Yeah.
point. And she goes, okay, I'm doing it now. And she just yoinked, and it just kept coming. And she said, okay, we're going to stop now for a second. And I was like, what do you mean that's not it? And she said, you need to take another deep breath in and then breathe out again. And she goes again. And then she said, stop, we're going to do it again. And so we did it 3 times. And it comes out, and all you see is this big coiled bit of tubing that has literally wrapped itself round. And she's had to pull that all the way out. So, I mean, I was just in so much pain.
Wow.
Um, and you know they don't give you anything for it. They just say it's kind of like a man up. So I luckily had some like paracetamol in my handbag, and I was like, okay, I just need to take this now. And I had been doing really, really well in my recovery until that point, and they took that drain out, and it just like knocked me, and I really struggled. Um, Probably for the next 2 weeks to really, no, I'd say the next week to really like feel okay. I was like militant with my pain relief, because the second I went too
Mm.
far without any pain relief, it was just so acutely sore.
I mean, the whole thing is
Um,
so alien, Heather, isn't it? To think that, and like you said, fortunately, you haven't really had much experience of hospitals. To jump in the deep end then and have
yeah,
this huge procedure and then have
yeah,
things inside your body that they're pulling out. I mean, I'm sat here thinking that sounds horrific.
Yeah, oh well, I
I
don't,
guess,
there's
you
no
know,
other way of describing it really. It was
yeah,
really
yeah, no,
horrific.
I'm glad you're
I'd
being
say
so
that was,
candid.
I'd say that was more horrific than waking up from surgery. Because
Mm,
the amount of awareness I had at that point was just
yeah,
so,
that's it with
I
the
was
surgery.
acutely
Yeah.
aware of what was happening. Whereas, when I came around from surgery, it had happened. I was not aware at all it had happened. It just happened.
Mm,
But yeah, so I, I don't think I said much to my sister-in-law on the way home, because I was just in so much pain. Um, so yeah, and then, every sort of week I had to go back and get everything checked, and they were always really happy with how everything was healing and progressing. And I I tried to stay as busy as possible. Like by the end of the first week, my kids were in sort of like these summer camps, so I was trying to walk them to and from just to get out of the house and get some exercise. And every day I got up, I as much as I could, did my hair and like, I got myself dressed. I didn't sit around in pajamas all day. I wore proper clothes. I put makeup on. It was really important to me that I felt normal.
mm,
Um, and my surgeon said, because you've done all those things, it really does actually help your healing, because you're saying to yourself, I need a normal life. You're not saying this is my life now, where you just sit in pajamas and you watch TV all day. Um, and you know, I got out of hospital on Sunday, and by Tuesday, I had a friend come round and take me for a walk. Because I was like, I need to get better. I cannot live like this. So I did, and every day, and I would do things like I fold laundry, just like little
mm.
things. Because I didn't have much movement. I could like hinge at the elbow, and I'd like brush my hair, and there are some pretty wild hairstyles at that time. I say at that time like it's not that long ago, but or like it was a long time ago, but it really isn't. Um, but yeah, I was just determined to have a normal life. Because I wanted to do things like take the kids to school on their first day of school, and um, yeah, just live a normal life. And also, I haven't told my kids what is going on, so they, for me, things had to be as business as usual. They knew I had
Yeah.
surgery. They knew what I had surgery for, um, but they don't know the big picture. So it was important to me to just keep things normal. So I I did all those things. Um, and then so I had to go back. So when you have a tumor removed, they send it for pathology, which means it goes to a lab, and a pathologist studies it, and they find out all the information about it. So uh, and that's where they were going to study the lymph node to make sure I didn't have cancer in the lymph node. And I got called to say, oh, the pathology results are in, so can you come in so we can discuss them with you? So I did, and they always check everything over, make sure it's okay. And the breast nurses are like these lovely ladies, and they're like, "Oh, it looks brilliant." Just you need these ladies in your life to tell you it looks good, so that you
Mm.
feel better about yourself. Um, and my surgeon, we sat down, all four of us, and my surgeon said, "It's good news. It's not in your lymph nodes." And she's just so matter of fact, and like, we don't need to beat around the bush about this, like. And it was just like the collective like sigh of relief, that it wasn't in my lymph node. Um, so that was a big positive. And then she said, um, "There's a few things we need to talk about." She said, "It was 8 centimeters. We feel like we got really good
8.
margins." Yeah. So give you
So
an
it had gone
idea,
from 3
the
to
palm of
8.
my hand is 10 centimeters. So yeah, to
Wow.
about there. Yeah, so it was 8 centimeters. And originally they thought it was grade 1. It got upgraded to grade 2. Um, and then originally they also thought it was just invasive ductal carcinoma. But once they'd examined it, they found it was also lobular tissue, so the tissue around the milk ducts. So essentially, like, two areas had been taken over by cancer. So, it became a little bit more like, this is a bit more aggressive,
Mm.
but still really positive because it wasn't in my lymph nodes. So I'm still technically considered early stage cancer. Um, and they already knew that I was something called HER2 negative, which is a growth factor that's found on the cancer cells, which means it's a less aggressive cancer and more treatable cancer. And they also knew that it was estrogen receptor positive and progesterone receptor positive, which means it responds to those hormones and it responds by growing, which obviously, if you're female, is a bit of a problem. But makes it very treatable because they can just block those hormones. And you have hormone treatment for 10 years. So that's one of my
Right.
treatments that I will go through. Um, and then, so yeah, that was kind of that. And she said, okay, and I'll see you in 2 weeks just to see how the surgery site's healing. But now it's on to the oncologist. Um, and I'd never met the oncologist. So I think the following week, this was 2 weeks ago, maybe. Yeah, no,
It's
two
all so
weeks
fresh,
Friday.
Heather, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, so I saw the oncologist, I want to say, yeah, it was 2 weeks ago from this Friday, so a week and a half ago. And he is like a specialist breast oncologist. He's called Mr. Thanvi. And he sort of, it's interesting every time you meet like one of these new consultants. He wanted to just know about me as a person. He said, "Oh, what do you do?" It says here you're Canadian, and like asked me all this other stuff. So like really wanted to know me as a person. And then he said, "What do you know?" And I said, "Well, I know it's grade 2, stage 2. It was 8 centimeters. It's HER2 negative, ER positive, PR positive." I said, "I know all these facts." And he said, and we'd sort of just like discussed what my what my cancer was, and he said, "You know a lot about this." And I said, "Well, I used to be a biology teacher, so I have a degree in biology. I have a good understanding of like the cellular side of these things." Um, and he said, "So what do you want to know?" I said, "Well, I want to know what happens next. Like, I've had surgery, but that's, you know." He said, "Well, let's talk about cancer." He said, "Right now, you are largely cancer free." Um, he said, "I say largely because on a microscopic level, you might still have some cancer left in you that we just can't get with surgery." He said, "So you're the most cancer free you've been for a while." And I was like, "Yeah, that's really good. I feel quite good about that." And I said, "So what's the next step? Do I have to have radiotherapy? Because that's the idea that's always been floated to me." And he said, "You have a big tumor." And I was like, "Yeah, I know that." He said, "I think your tumor needs to go for some testing." Um, so he said, "I'm going to send it for a test called an oncotype, and we're um, going to look at these different genetic markers, um, the genome of your cancer, and we're going to decide whether you need chemotherapy." So last Monday, my tissue sample went to California, went on a
Oh,
nice
wow.
little
Right.
holiday.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, and it takes 2 weeks for those results to come. So right now I am waiting, and it's very much like my fate is in this man's hands, of whether I need to have chemo. So basically, what they're checking for right now is my risk of recurrence.
Okay.
Um, and that is based on all of these sort of factors, like whether it's HER2 positive or negative, or hormone positive or negative,
Mm.
um, whether the lymph nodes are involved. And they give you a score out of 100. And because I'm under 40, The score I need to get needs to be a lot lower. My chance of recurrence is quite high because I'm so young.
Right, yeah, because of your age, it actually plays against you in that case.
Yeah, so I have to get a score of under 15 essentially to not be considered for chemo. So my chances of having chemo right now are pretty high. So when he told me that, it was like the waterworks turned on.
Mm,
And sitting beside me is my sister-in-law, who the day before was her birthday, and her best friend died of bowel cancer that day. And I was just like, God, can we have
wow,
a bit of a
yeah,
break here? It's like, I think the best way to describe a cancer diagnosis is like one step forward and two steps back. Because, I did my one step forward by having my big surgery, and then I went
mm,
to the oncologist and it was two steps back. Or like if you're decorating a room, it always gets worse before it gets better.
yeah,
You go in, you rake out all the cracks, you sand the walls, they look like shit, and then you go work your magic. And
yeah,
that's how it feels with this. Like, I'm at that stage right now where I feel like, yeah, I've raked out all those cracks and they look a little bit shitty. Um, so although I've got like really good news that I don't have it in my lymph nodes, I still have this like big looming thing of chemo ahead of me,
yeah,
um, which had just never been discussed. Um, and the recurrence, the risk of recurrence had never ever really been discussed with me. Everything was so focused on getting it out that we never
mm,
really talked about
what
uh,
happens
what
after?
what happens after. So so yeah, I should find out by next Friday if I have to have chemo. But in my head, I've kind of, it's hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. I have prepared for the worst that I will be having chemo, and it's 6 months. It's 8 rounds of chemo, um, and you go every 3 weeks. Um, and then he sort of said to me, "You can work while we're having this done. It's not, you'll feel really shitty for 3 or 4 days." He said, "But
Mm,
it would be he said we need to be as confident as possible that this never comes back for you."
yeah,
Um, so while I was absolutely gutted to hear that, something that I had just basically put out of my mind might be happening, I was kind of just like incredibly grateful that they were, really taking every step they needed to make sure that I don't get cancer again.
absolutely. Heather, I
Um,
think at this point, I just want to say a few things, which is first of all, I didn't realize, like before talking to you, that you were still very much in the midst of it.
oh
So
yeah,
to come onto this episode and speak about that at this point takes an incredible degree of strength. So I just want to thank you for doing that. I think the way that you've explained everything that's happened to you chronologically, the hows, the whens, and what happens is going to be of benefit to people. I'm learning a lot listening to you now, and I always take it that if I am, then other people will be too. But I also want to just take a moment to like give you my personal best wishes. Like I hope that the news that's coming your way is positive.
thank
Um,
you. I hope so
and
too.
yeah, but just keep fighting it. You know,
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing else you can do. The only thing you can do is put one foot in front of the other. There's literally nothing else you could do. And
I'm such a strong believer though that mindset plays a huge part in the fight and the recovery. I read some research a while ago that stated that when people get given a cancer diagnosis, their immune system like virtually instantly takes a huge hit,
yeah,
just based on the chemicals that you release in your body and the stress levels. And I think having that sort of like positive outlook can really aid in the outcome.
yeah. Um, so I kind of, I think when you get given this sort of diagnosis, you kind of have to make a decision. You have to make a decision of how you're going to face it.
Mm.
And my husband always jokes that when I've made a decision, I've made a decision. There's no turning back. Like, we'll choose a takeaway, and he'll be like, "What do you want?" And I'm like, "I want Chinese." And he's like, "There's no convincing you otherwise. You're never going to change your mind." And that is very true. When I've made a decision, I've made a decision. I bought myself a truck, and I decided I wanted a Ford Ranger, and I got a Ford Ranger. And it it took a lot of months of convincing that's where I wanted to spend my money. But I got it. And I'm as stubborn as they come. I am one of the most stubborn individuals on earth, and I will absolutely admit that. Um, but it's definitely part of what makes me me. And I was kind of like doggedly determined to not let this take over my life.
Mm.
So I, so I, so I have this. This is going to sound a bit grim and like quite sad, but because I was on my own for those 3 weeks waiting for like all the information before my surgery, I needed people. I needed people in my life. So I made this WhatsApp group called Heather Kicks Cancer's Ass. And it's got a nice little thing of boobs as the picture on WhatsApp. And it's basically a collection of like 12 friends, neighbors, people who are in my life. And like when I say these people don't know each other, a lot of them, some of them are teaching friends. Like I've got a bridesmaid from London, my 65-year-old neighbor, two neighbors from my street, my sister-in-law, other friends. Like these people don't know each other from Adam.
Mm.
And I put them all together in a group, and they all became friends. Basically, they had to become friends, and it was a place for me to update everybody, so I didn't have to keep having to repeat myself 12 times. It
Mm.
was a place where I could say, "Look, I have an oncology appointment today. Can somebody take me, or can somebody have the kids?" Um, and just give them updates on what was going on, or can somebody come visit me in the hospital, or just to arrange who was coming when, things like that. It was a very like practical but grim decision to make, but it's been brilliant. And so when I got out of that oncology appointment, I couldn't talk to anyone. There was nothing I could say to anyone. So and I said to my sister-in-law, I can't say anything to anyone right now. I'm just too shell-shocked. I need some time to sit with this. And I didn't write anything to the group for 2 days, and I just updated them and sort of told them the ins and outs of what was going on. Um, and everyone was like, okay, look, I can see you on Monday, I can see you on Tuesday, I can see you on Wednesday. And so everybody sort of stepped in and said, I'll take a day, we'll go do something. Um, which was really nice. And this was last week. And actually, my sister-in-law messaged me on Friday, and she said, "Are you okay? How are you doing? Um, can we meet up?" And I just, I'd had a lot of time to think over everything, and I just said, "I'm okay." I say, I know people say that all the time, like in the world of mental health, saying "I'm okay" is like a big red flag. Um, and I was like, "No, I'm really okay. Let me explain myself." I said, "I've just, at some points in your life, you just have to let go. I'm
Mm.
not worried. I'm not scared. I can't change anything about this. Um, when I say I implicitly trust these doctors, I trusted that surgeon, and she gave me no reason to not trust her. And she has, made an absolute brilliant job of everything. And I trust that oncologist has my best interest at heart, and he's not leaving any stone unturned, and I can't do anything other than that.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, you kind of just have to embrace the chaos of it. Like, yes, I have this year of my life where nothing is normal, and nothing at all is normal. I'm not working. I spend most of my time going back and forth to hospital appointments, or on the phone to insurance companies, or whatever. So I'm gonna just take this year to slow down and enjoy all that stuff. Like,
Mm.
I don't have to rush around. The laundry doesn't need to be done on a Saturday. The house doesn't need to be cleaned on a Sunday. I don't need to get the food shopping on a Friday. I can do it when I want. Um, and I can enjoy driving the kids to school and not worrying about, oh, I have to go to Brewers on the way to this job or whatever. Um, so yeah, you just have to kind of submit yourself to all this stuff and just let it play out because there is absolutely nothing you can do to change it. And you just have to um, see, and like, I'm not being toxically positive here. You have to kind of see it for what it is. I get to see my friends that I haven't seen for ages because all of a sudden I'm quite popular. Uh, they want to spend time with me,
Yeah.
and are making time for me. And when you have little kids, and we all work, it's hard. Like a WhatsApp group between women is like, can't make that date, can't make that date. Can you make this
Yeah.
date? Nope. My husband has this, or my kids have this. And, suddenly there's none of that. People are just making that time and that space for me. Um, so I'm just going to take it and run with it. And, amazing things have happened. Like my neighbor Sue, whose children are around the same age as me, has just, like become this, like, such an absolute amazing figure in my life. Um, and we'd always been friends, which is strange to say you've been friends with like a 65-year-old lady who lives next door to you. Um, but she's really like, while I was alone, she was really there for me. She would pop over, and like after I got the news from the oncologist, she came to the door and she said to my husband, I just really wanted to give Heather a hug. And so I later that day I just popped over, and her and her daughters, who are around the same age as me, were like, oh my God, are you okay? Um, which is great because I don't have any family in this country. Like my family are
Mm.
all in Canada. I've got my sister-in-law who I'm really, really close to, who is one of my closest friends. But that's it, really. Um, so, it's brought all of these people in my life a lot closer together. Um,
Can I just ask Heather, how's your husband been through this?
so, so my husband is like a classically British man. I don't know how to really describe this, as like he was raised in a very like stiff upper lip family. Uh, and his parents were northern, uh, and just very get on with it. Um, so I remember like the first, like before I'd even been fully diagnosed, after I'd gone for the appointment, where they'd done all the screening, he said, I really don't want you to die. And I sort of said, whoa, let's not, let's not jump to any conclusions here. Um, but, he has, you know, he doesn't say much, which is really hard. I know it's in his head. I know he's stressed, and he works a very, very stressful job. Um, and while his job said to him, take all the time you need, it's always with that little asterisk of, but not too much.
Mm.
All the stuff you need to be doing isn't going to be done by somebody else. Um, so I think it was a lot for him to sort of balance in the first few weeks. Um, and yeah, he doesn't say much, and you can only like sort of poke the bear so much.
Mm.
Um, and I'm very mindful that he has to process this as much as I have to process this, and there's probably some pretty pretty big thoughts going through his head.
Yeah, of course.
Um, so yeah, we're and I don't think that's really going to be processed until I'm like in active treatment.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think he's obviously happy, and he's really grateful that like I'm not the burden type. I'm not like, oh, please wait on me hand and foot. Um,
Mhm.
so we've kind of just kept our lives as normal as possible. Like the only thing that's not normal about our life right now is that I'm not working.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, he doesn't talk about it. He's very British. Um, whereas I think Canadians are a bit more like open book
I can
about these
understand
things.
it. I can understand it again from a male perspective. It's I think it's kind of it's in our genes really to. I mean,
Yeah.
I always say that my own position within my family, I feel, is to provide and protect.
Well, that's just
Um,
it. He is definitely um, the provider and feels like he needs to keep working to keep providing
mm,
and keep things normal and that sort of thing. And we're in a fortunate enough position that me not working is not like hugely detrimental to our finances. So I'm able to not work. And we've been in that
mm,
position before because when the kids were little, I took a couple of years off to raise them. So we're just back to where we were sort of 5 years ago, sort of thing. But yeah, I think he feels like an immense pressure to just keep working and keep things
yeah, I would
ticking
imagine
over for
again.
us.
As you said, at the moment, it's very much fluid and present.
Yeah,
So hopefully, once the situation plays itself out, and once you're recovered down the line, he has that time to work through and process everything that he's had to think and deal with over this period.
yeah, and I think it is fluid, and it's the fastest time of your life, but this simultaneously the slowest time of your life, because you spend a lot of time waiting. Um,
Mm,
but actually, if you look at the amount of time that's gone by, it's been 2 months, and all of this has happened in 2 months.
it's a lot. It's a lot. Yeah.
Um, so I think actually a lot of the processing needs to come after that,
Yeah.
when you ring the bell. And
Yeah.
lots of
Yeah. Yeah.
lots of charities, and the charity that I'm raising money for
Yeah,
do.
let's get on to that. Let's get on to that
Yeah.
because again, the initial point of contact between us, although we've spoken before, was to reach out and see if I wanted to get involved with the raffle. So tell me about what you're doing there.
So first of all, October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So I am raising money for breast cancer now, which is one of the UK's biggest breast cancer charities. And it provides lots of resources for people who have been newly diagnosed and anywhere along their journey. Um, and for me, the most sort of useful is their website because it just has information on everything. It has information on the different types of surgery, the statistics of how many people have breast cancer, information about people with young breast cancer, which, I'm 38, but I am actually considered young breast cancer because I'm under 50.
Mm,
Um, they have stuff on primary breast cancers, secondary breast cancers, literally anything you can imagine. And you have a question, you just Google it, and it's always breast cancer now that comes up. Um, and they have a campaign on October 18th called Wear It Pink. So, all you lovely decorators, hopefully you'll be sporting some pink on the 18th of October. Um, and
we
originally I
can
thought, oh,
definitely
just,
arrange that.
yeah, I originally thought, oh, just, I'll have like a coffee morning at my house. And I thought, what could I do? I I think most people know that I get on with Paps quite well because they worked for me, Joe and Jack, last year when
Hmm.
I got stuck on a big job and they got caught short on work. So
Yeah.
we worked together for 3 days last year. And Joe did the raffle last year, and he
Best
raised
time of
loads of.
Joe's life, I heard.
Sorry,
I said the
best
best
time of his
time of
life.
Joe's
Yes.
life, I've heard.
I'm not sure about that. I think they spent most of the time taking the piss out of me. Um,
Sounds about right, yeah.
There's some very interesting memes made out of those 3 days. Um, but yeah, so he did his raffle last year, and he raised
Mm,
really good money for it. And I thought, what can I do? Um, and I had met Kev actually around my birthday. He'd come to the paint well in Reading, and he was like engraving brushes. So I thought, oh, I'll go by. It's a day I'm not working. And I'd met him, and I thought, oh, who could I get to sort of like get behind this? And so I messaged him and I said, look, this is the situation. Same message I sent you virtually. And but you had already known because Joe had made that nice little um, reel of me on the Talking Tradesman. Um,
and who
and
knew it would play out into reality?
well, exactly. Um, and so Kev straight away was like, yes, I'll do anything. Like, just let me know. What do you want? And I was like, look, just whatever you can give me. Like, I'm not asking for much here.
Mm.
And I said, I'm going to get in contact with a few other brands. And he said, leave it with me. I've got loads of contacts. Let me get in contact with them. So Kev, I think I messaged him on a Saturday, which was a bit shitty of me. And on, I want to say Monday morning, these two massive boxes. No, it was Tuesday because he had to go um, to the warehouse and get all the stuff, and he'd chosen it all. And Tuesday morning, it arrived at my house, and these boxes are like chock full of some of Kev's best gear. Um, and then obviously he'd spoken to Airworthy. They sent me a load of stuff. Unilite sent me stuff.
Oh, brilliant!
Um,
They're great lads. So
so
yeah,
so I've got like this full complement. Like I've got every brush Kev makes, nearly all the Airworthy brushes. I've got like blue vein rollers. I've got Kev's new scuttle. I've got all his new fillers. I'm trying to think of what else he sent. But there's a wash box, all of this stuff. Like, I mean, if you added up each of those things, like he sent me hundreds of pounds of stuff. Um, and then Unilight sent me like a really nice light. Obviously, Kev is the one who organised that. Um, but yeah, and then messaged you. Then I messaged Q1. Q1 sent me a sustainer full of stuff, like t-shirt, mug, hand masker, loads of tape.
yeah. Q1
Um,
sponsors of the podcast as well. They're fantastic people down there.
and then who else? So I went to my local brewers, and actually at this point I was starting to feel really guilty about the fact that I hadn't been to brewers in a very long time. Like I think the last time I went was like, I don't know, early July. And there's a paint well in Reading, so they're very competitive with each other. Um,
Yeah,
and so I think I went Monday, and there's this massive, great big Scottish guy. He's like 6'6", called Steve. He's an ex-decorator. He's amazing. And he said, "Oh, we thought you'd left us." And I said, "No, I haven't left you." And he said, "We kind of figured out it was school holidays, but we thought you'd be back by now." And I said, "Well, I'm here now." And he said, "But you're not in decorating gear." And so I explained everything to him. And he was in tears. He was really upset. Um, and sort of took me through to the manager, Tom. And Tom was like, "Yeah, don't leave it with me. We'll sort your stuff out." So brewers, I don't know, they were going to give me some vouchers and some other stuff. Um, and so I messaged uh, Dusty Boys and said, anything you can contribute. And they just released their Dusty Girls limited edition stuff. So he sent me a Dusty Girls mat to go in as part of that. And then I've had a few other people who have confirmed but not sent anything. But interestingly enough, I think I've contacted maybe 7 or 8 companies.
yeah.
I think four people I've contacted have said my mum has breast cancer. Um, so it was like for them, it was like a no-brainer. They were like, "Yeah, we'll
Mm.
send you the stuff." So yeah, it was, and nobody has said to me, yeah, sorry, we can't stretch to that. It's very
Yeah,
much like
it's
we'll
Heather,
do whatever we can.
absolutely. I mean, from my
So
part, just to go on formal record here, whoever wins the raffle, they can go onto our website, onto the Talking Tradesman website, www.talkingtradesman.co.uk. Go through onto the merch section, pick out whatever hoodie design and colour you want. Let me know what size, and I'll get it shipped out. Our hoodies are all printed to order, so I don't carry stock. But whoever wins, and that's the other thing. I mean, I could send you a hoodie in large, and the person could be a triple XL or
yeah,
a
exactly.
small or whatever it might be. So whoever wins can pick their own colour, design, and size, and I will get that shipped straight out to them.
Yeah. So people have just been so generous. It's funny because Dave, aka Bobby's Decorating,
Yeah,
posted a
yeah.
link to his. He was doing some sort of charity. He was raising money for a hospice that his mum had worked at, and I sent him the link to my Just Giving, and I said, "I'll sponsor you if you sponsor me." And he messaged me back, and he said, "I've just I've just had a cry about this. Oh my
No,
God."
bless them.
Um, and it just asked me loads and loads and loads of questions. And I am happy to talk about everything that's happened.
Mm,
Um, but and I will absolutely have that conversation with uh, people I know. But I think what people don't understand is it's quite a taxing conversation to have because
mm,
I have to relive all that stuff
yeah,
um, every time I have that conversation. Um, and actually, it's a lot easier to have it by text because I don't have to actually physically have the words leave my mouth. Um, and I find it a lot easier to sort of talk about the actual biology behind it than the
mm,
emotion behind it because it's
yeah.
very
It's
hard to
understandable.
explain how you feel because the way you feel changes from day to day. Um, but also, I am a pretty private person. Like, if you look on my Instagram page, you don't see loads of pictures of me. You don't see me in
Mm,
reels that often. And my Instagram is pretty much just decorating. It is, you know, my stories probably, I'll have a bit more about my family on there. Um, and actually, my daughter doesn't really like to have her face on there, so she doesn't. She's almost 8. But my son's pretty happy, so you see lots of like gappy tooth pictures of my son. Um, but a few people have said to me, "Oh, you've been really quiet lately. What's going on?"
mm,
Um, and I just had to say, "Oh, I had surgery. I don't. I'm just recovering. I'm not allowed to do any lifting or anything for 6 to 8 weeks," which is true. I'm not allowed to do any lifting. Um, but yeah, I wouldn't, if it weren't for the raffle, I wouldn't be sitting here because I am a private person. Um, but I really feel like this charity is like such a worthy cause, and
absolutely. So
I also
how do
I
you
need
enter?
something in my life. So
Yeah,
I
some
have a Just Giving page,
okay.
um,
I
and it's
will put that.
oh
So wherever you're watching, if you send me the link, Heather, I will put the link to the Just Giving page in the episode description for this. So
yeah,
wherever you're watching or listening, scroll down. The Just Giving link will be there.
yeah. So oh, I think my headphones are just like, hold on,
I
give me
can
two
still hear
seconds.
you at the moment.
Oh, you can hear me. Um, so yeah, they're just giving, and basically, I've said for every £5 that you donate, it's an entry into the raffle. And yeah, I'd say the raffle will probably be valued at about £500. And when I
Brilliant.
say this stuff isn't tat, it's not tat. It's not like
Oh, it's
400
great
rolls of
gear.
tape
Yeah,
or
no,
like
yeah.
a bunch of pens or shit like that you get that sits in your garage and you never touch,
The Talking
or a bunch of
Tradesman hoodie is
keychains.
worth it alone.
Exactly, exactly.
But it is. I mean,
Um,
Kev's gear is great. Arrowworthy's gear is great. Q1 are fantastic. If you're a decorator, it's going to be well worth getting involved in.
yeah,
And
I
not
mean,
only that, forget what you're getting from it. It's what you can help towards. So it's win-win.
Yeah, and I mean, when I say to people like, I don't get any benefit from this, like financially, I'm
Mm,
not benefiting from this. But what I've got from this charity so far over the last 2 months, like the knowledge that I've been given is so invaluable. Like
such a worthy cause.
it's just helped me to understand where I'm at in the process, what the next steps are. You know, I can look at what the different treatments are and how they impact me. Um, you know, I don't get to choose those things, but I may as well be informed about them.
Mm,
Um, so yeah, it gives me all of that um, information. So yeah, and also like for my own well-being, I need to be doing something right now, and this gives me something to do. And as much as
100%.
I don't want to have to like put my face out there and tell everyone my story, um, because it is a very big thing. It's a, you know, I'm putting a lot of myself out there right now. Um, I think it's worth it. And I also think like, you know, a huge part of my following is men, male decorators, and maybe they need to be a bit more aware of this stuff,
Definitely. Yeah.
because uh, it does happen. It happens a lot. And, you know, I'm quite unusual. I'm one of 4% of women who are going to be diagnosed with breast cancer uh, under the age of 40. So, you know, about 2,200 people are in my position a year. I'm also then an even smaller proportion of people who has a mastectomy at this age. So yeah, it's and all it you know, I was very much raised in that generation of check yourself. You know,
Mm,
you know, you have to check yourself, and I did check myself. When I say you know, I did all the things I was supposed to do, and you know, it doesn't discriminate. And I have asked both the surgeon and the oncologist, what have I done to get this? What has caused this? And both of them, without even skipping a beat, said, you've done nothing. It's just bad luck. So, yeah, it's just
mm.
bad luck. But also, it's funny because I said this to Dave when I was talking to him. I'm really sorry, but I've talked to you a lot about my boobs. And he was like, I don't know why people need to be weird about boobs. Like, it is, you know, it is a reality of life where women, we have them, they're not a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
It's,
don't be so
again,
uncomfortable about it.
hopefully this conversation has done something to raise awareness. I've learned from it, so other people will have to really appreciate how open you've been about the whole process. And like you said, particularly the fact that you're not somebody that likes to put things out there in public. This is pretty public,
Yeah.
but it's all been done for a really good cause. And if you can turn all this shit and negative experience that you've had to go through and bring some light into that through doing the raffle, through raising awareness, and through potentially supporting others, then all credit to you, Heather. You know, thank you um, for choosing to do that on this platform. Really appreciate the trust that you've shown in me in doing that. Um, and again, I just want to say, you know, I really wish you all the best. And I don't want to say all the cliche things like, oh, I'll keep my fingers crossed for you, but I will keep my fingers crossed with you. You know, I'll check in with you and find out how you're getting on. And well, let's push this. Let's, you know, it's just giving, isn't it, son? Is
Yeah,
that right?
just
Just
giving.
giving.
And
Let's
actually,
push this.
if you Google my name, Heather Isherwood, it might just giving, or if you go to just giving and put in the search bar Heather Isherwood, I'm the first thing
So
that
it's all
pops up.
there,
You'll
set
see
up,
me.
ready to go.
Yeah, it's set up, ready to go. I think
Fantastic.
I've actually already like I want to say I've raised £88 already because a friend from Canada, um, whose girlfriend had breast cancer, has already
Mm.
donated money. Dave has already donated money because I donated money to his cause. Um,
I'll pop it on my platforms as well, Heather. So
yeah,
we'll see what we can do there.
Yeah.
When are you doing the raffle? What date's it going to be?
So I would like to do the raffle on October 18th, which is Wear It Pink Day.
On the
But
day. Okay.
yeah, so that's a month from today.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Oh, it
so
is. Yeah.
that would be
God,
a
yeah. It's
nice
the 18th. Yeah.
that would be a nice day to do it. But obviously, I'm not married to that idea. I'd like to
Let's
for it to
Heather
get as much support
set
as
that date.
possible.
Set that date.
Um,
Let go for it then. I can get this episode out quicker than I normally would. We'll release it as a special episode to try and get more time to for
yeah.
people to listen and be aware of this. Um, again,
I think what I will say though is like if you're watching this and I somebody you normally talk to on Instagram and we normally message each other because there's loads of people I message, don't just stop messaging me.
oh God, no, yeah,
I'm still a person. Like while I'd rather not just exclusively talk about cancer, I'll post updates now that it's like sort of, you know, out there in the open. I will post updates. I'll keep you posted. I would really like to go to the painting and decorating shows, and that was always the plan. But at the moment, that's very much up in the air. And you know, things like I might lose my hair, guys, which you know is a pretty bitter pill to swallow for me because I'm quite attached to my hair. Um, but yeah, if you can't hack following me right now, please do unfollow me. I don't really mind. Uh, I
Phone's died. Can you hear me?
I can still hear you. Yeah, we're
Okay.
okay. We're okay.
Um, but yeah, I would. I'd rather not just like exclusively talk about my cancer. It's not the only thing about me. I do still really like talking about decorating, even though it's not something I get to do right now. I will be back to decorating. I'd say I'm like 90% mobile at the moment. Like I can. That's how high I can reach, which is quite good. Um, so yeah, just treat me like a normal person. Also, the worst thing you can do to a person who has cancer is say, "Oh, I know somebody who died from breast cancer. I know." The number of times somebody has said that to me, I'm like, I don't.
Yeah, I'm not sure that'd be the first thing out of my mouth.
Yeah, I'm
But
not.
yeah,
I really sympathise with you. I do really feel terrible that that's happened to you, but that's not where I'm at right now. And yeah, for anyone who is wondering, my prognosis is really, really positive. I am pretty much cancer free. Everything now is to just make sure that it doesn't come back. And I'll either be done my treatment before Christmas if I just have radiotherapy, or if I have chemo, that's 6 months plus. Then I have 3 rounds of radiotherapy, and that should be like sometime spring, early summer. But yeah, I should be able to ring the bell by sort of summer next year.
100%. You'll be ringing that bell.
Yeah. And
100%.
that's never ever been in question. It's just the path we take to get there is very
Yeah.
much undecided at the moment. But yeah, I am. You know, when I when I say I'm okay, I really do mean I am actually, you know, quite well, and I feel okay, and every day is different. But it's nice to have people around me to talk to, and yeah.
Yeah, I think, again, Heather, just to repeat what you're saying, I'm getting an echo now. So we'll have to sort of pull it to an end, but I think we were nearly there anyway. Just treat Heather exactly how you did before you knew this. Simple as that.
Yeah, and please join the raffle.
100%. We will get that pushed. Heather, thank you so much again. I wish you all the best. That's all I can say at this stage, really. And again, thank you for sharing your story on this platform.
And thank you for having me share it. I mean, yeah, it's probably
It's been an honour.
the most civilized way to tell people you have cancer.
It's the first time that I've had an episode like this, so yeah, no, it's a new one. It's a new one for me.
I think
I'm
I'm
sure
also
it'll be well received.
your most international guest as well.
You are definitely at this point. At this point, there are a few in the works,
Oh,
but yeah, no, it's been amazing. To everyone listening, thank you again for listening. All Heather's details will be in the episode below. Get onto that donation page, get the donations in. Let's get this raffle as big as possible and support a fantastic cause, support Heather, and let's smash it out the park as a community. So thank you very much for listening, and I'll catch you soon on the next one.